Did you know that you can make gluten-free sourdough starter? It's similar to the commercial yeast that we use in our yeast breads, but sourdough yeast is captured from the air. This video uses dried flecks or powder sourdough starter to start the process. You can use your own from discard, or if you're just starting out, you can purchase some and you'll never have to buy it again. So you'll start with 10 grams of gluten-free sourdough starter and 10 grams of water. Just add it together and make sure it's rehydrated. Shake this together to allow it to rehydrate. Wait until the starter is fully rehydrated to process on the next step. This could be done in a few minutes, but I happen to wait for a full day. You can see that I have included a screenshot of the time that I do each of the feeds to show how flexible this process is. I use an identical empty jar to weigh on the scale and find the weight of the starter inside the jar. So it helps to have two of the container that you are making your starter in. Your first feeding will be 20 grams of brown rice flour and 20 grams of room temperature water. Thoroughly push down after you've stirred it to make sure that none of it is sticking to the sides. This will make sure that it doesn't dry out. The wild yeast grows well in the moist environment, so we want to make sure to get all the yeasties growing as much as possible. Wait 4 to 8 hours until your next feeding. The second feeding will be 60 grams of brown rice flour and 60 grams of water. It's really important to use a whole grain flour so that the yeast has adequate food so it can grow. Again, mix it thoroughly and cover it with a cloth and rubber band and let it set for 4 to 8 hours. Now you can see that the bubbles are starting to form. The third feeding will begin with discarding. Discard all but 100 grams of starter. You can place the 100 grams into a new jar if that's easier for you. Then add 100 grams of water and 100 grams of brown rice flour. At this step, I add a rubber band around the jar to mark the top of the mixture so that I can tell how much it has risen. Throughout this process, you'll want to check the consistency of the starter. Depending upon your environment, you may need slightly more or slightly less water. If you're in a very humid environment like I am in the summer, you'll want to use a little less water. I'm in Arkansas State and I usually use about 80 grams of water with 100 of brown rice flour and starter. But in the winter when it's dry, I use 100. And basically, you're looking for a texture that is as dry as possible, but you can still stir it. Also, when you tap it on the counter, it should flatten at the top. It shouldn't be still lumpy. Can you please go ahead and comment in the comments section below what amount of water you used, what your humidity percentage is if you have that, or what location you're in so that we can benefit the other people in our community. Also, while you're at it, please like and subscribe. That will very much help me. Thank you. You can see that it has about doubled after 8 hours or so. Our goal is to get a little more rise in much less time, 4 hours to be specific. It will continue to rise faster and fuller with each feeding. You can keep feeding every 4 to 8 hours. In this case, I let mine go 16 hours before feeding it again, and you can see that it has fallen from peak rise by the time I feed it. Then you can see on Friday after 6 hours the rise looks pretty good. It's near double and it's speeding up, and then I forget about it for 43 hours and leave it at room temperature. And this is just being real with you. I know that sometimes we get totally off schedule, and the good thing is that sourdough is flexible. It works with your schedule. So Sunday morning, I feed it again, and I finally get diligent on Monday morning when I feed it again at 8:30 and then at noon. Then doubles in 4 hours, and it's ready to bake with. Yum! Sourdough bread! You can find the sourdough bread link at the end of this video or below. Sourdough can last 2 weeks in the fridge uncared for. However, feeding every week is ideal. These don't need to be full feeds. You can just give it a little bit of brown rice flour and a little bit of water. But if I'm baking every 3 to 4 days, I don't even need to worry about it. If I'm having a particularly hard time reviving my starter, I might use potato water, the water that's left after cooking potatoes, for like mashed potatoes for instance, for the water to feed my starter, and it loves that. Finally, if you won't be baking for a month or so, you can dry your own starter. Simply brush it out on a silicone sheet or a parchment paper in a very thin layer. You want to use ideally peak rise starter because it'll have the highest concentration of yeast in it. Although you can also use discard. I've done it with both. Discard may just take a little bit longer to start up again. And then just let it dry in a well-ventilated and dehumidified place. And then after 24 hours, it will be dry enough that you can crumble it up and place it in a jar. It can be stored for over a year once it has dried. I also keep my dried starter in the fridge just to prolong its life and quality and to keep as many of the yeast alive as long as possible. Thank you for listening to this video. I hope it is helping you make your starter. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the comments below. I'm interested on seeing your pictures of your starter too. So if you can post those, I would love to see it. Thank you.